Welcome to the Aro Benaiah Show, where we spotlight blue-collar entrepreneurs, business builders, and hands-on leaders who are shaping the industry with skill, resilience, and real-world experience. Today, I'm joined by John Cobb, an international advisor who help board and business owner navigate government's messaging and high-pressure transition. Through his firm, Follows Advisory, John works with leaders in complex markets, often stepping in when the usual playbook fails and clarity matters most. His unique blend of government expertise and direct response marketing give him a rare ability to help organizations protect trust, stability, growth, and communications with precision. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show, John.
No, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invite, Aro.
Yeah, thank you. So, John, what was it like growing up?
Let's see here. I grew up along the U.S.-Mexico border in a place called Tucson, Arizona, and got a lot of exposure to international culture that way, and that helped me, ultimately learn Spanish and later Portuguese, which I transitioned to recently after starting my advisory work in Mozambique.
Wow, amazing. So, what led you into the world of governments and advising leaders in high pressure environments?
I just saw a need for it. I'm a natural anthropologist, so that means I'm really good at picking up international details on people. And, I was willing to handle a lot of situations that most people would be, scared of. Even when I was starting my professional career, I'd be the guy who'd put out the fire.
Wow, amazing. That was really bold. Okay, so you work across Latin America, Africa, and Europe. What's convinced you that emerging and what convinced you that emerging and fragile markets require a different playbook?
Well, just the whole thought process. It even changes between countries. Uganda has nothing to do with Nigeria, and Nigeria has nothing to do with Mozambique. Every country has their different rules, and even the US is vastly different from Canada, even though we both speak English and have similar sensibilities. Our approach in seeing things is different. So, throughout the course of my career, I just felt that being adaptable is the most important thing you can do.
Oh, wow, amazing. So, what is one moment earlier in your career that shaped how you think about leadership under pressure?
Well, with leadership under pressure, the most important thing you can do is just take a step back and say, hey, we got time to fix this. We need to take action now. But most problems, they're not going to be the end of the world. The problem is a lot bigger in your head than it is when you're actually dealing with it. You just need to take a deep breath and be like, hey, okay, this could be catastrophic. It could not be catastrophic, but we're just going to do the best we can. And the truth is, the game keeps going until you die. So, the main goal of business is you just got to make it through tomorrow. And if you're making it through tomorrow, you're doing something right.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for that analogy. So many entrepreneurs don't fully understand government. How do you explain it in a simple, practical term?
Okay, so for the entrepreneurs that don't understand governance, what it basically is, it's setting up like the rules or the laws that you have inside of your business to make sure bad things don't happen. Right. So, in every country around the world, there's a law that says, don't kill somebody, right? But you need to have like employees or you have to have rules that get more specific for the businesses so bad things don't happen. So, that can be as simple as, you have to wear closed-toed shoes, no sandals at the office, right? Because that distracts from performance. Or it can be as complicated as, a 260-page document on how the board of directors is supposed to be run, detailing specific legal protections. But every organization needs some sort of rules so that they can work effectively.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for that explanation. So, can you share stories where small risk escalate into major crisis, because governments fail?
Right. So, there's a situation I dealt with number of years ago. And what had happened was there was a founder of a professional services firm that did a lot of cross-border work, and he'd gone on paternity leave. His wife had given birth to a beautiful baby boy, and he wanted to be at home for, basically the first month of the baby's life. But while he was away, one of his trusted employees who'd been with the firm basically since the beginning started misdirecting client funds into his own bank account. He'd call people up and say, "We've had a change in your bank account. You need to deposit the funds here." And what he did also was he entered the phone system and he blocked the phone numbers of the clients so they couldn't call in and talk to other people at the company to discuss what was going on, right? So the reason why this internal fraud happened was because there was no governance in place and there was just too much trust placed into an individual. And the individual, they didn't exhibit any of the signs of somebody who would defraud the organization. So he just got abused.
Wow, wow. That one was very, very terrific. And the fact that trust was not placed on someone, and yeah, it's really a different way of looking at governments, making it more like sharing the power all around, other than putting it wholly on someone that lead to that particular situation. So, what pattern do you consistently see when business collapse, not from lack of revenue, but from weak structures and communication?
I mean, usually it just starts with organizational drift, right? And what that is people get further away from the mission statement, further away from the why they're doing something, right? And it can be as simple as somebody saying, "I don't feel like doing this today. I'm tired." And then they put it off again, and they put it off again, and they put it off again. And by putting things off, the problem can grow and get bigger.
Wow, wow. Owing to your years of being in this particular industry or helping businesses create the right kind of government towards sustaining everything they have actually built in, what can be done differently to actually more like sustain a goal and vision other than over time, just the way you just make reference of it, a whole lot of persons who started the company, they start drifting out from what the goals is, from what the vision is, from each and every particular stuff. Which kind of culture do you think can build right towards sustaining what started out earlier on, owing to the goals and vision the company has?
So I believe that government starts, as soon as when you're a single solopreneur just trying to get something off the ground. You have to build yourself the proper habits in it that say, "I'm going to do X, Y, and Z." At that stage, you don't need a whole tremendous amount of documentation. You don't need a massive rule book, but you do need to put structures and systems in for your place because then you're going to eventually have to hire a virtual assistant or somebody to help with other tasks. A lot of entrepreneurs hire salespeople. So that's when you need to be planting the seeds of structure. So, um, I can't stress it enough. It just starts at the beginning and really having the mission statement clarified. And that's something I commonly do when I take a new board advisory position with startups, especially. As I said, "Hey, what's your mission statement? Why are you doing this?" And a lot of people, they have a hard time articulating why they're doing something, but it's absolutely necessary to get it on paper and in a concrete form. So that way, when the drift starts happening, you can always refer to it.
A whole lot of entrepreneur most times they are just how like being that they have an idea of what the business entails. It can easily just get overwhelming that they won't get to sit down to work on their mission statement, to work on their goals and their visions. And just hearing this just speak volumes. So as much as the goals and the energy towards doing that particular thing is. I think it's very very key that we get to they get to reinforce working on their mission statement so that everybody that is being onboarding they will know what this company stand for, which is going to speak volume when it comes to the longevity of the company. Yeah. So you have helped organization prepare for exits. What are the biggest mistake founder make when getting ready to sell?
Okay, the biggest mistake I see is in the financials. People, they have their finances optimized for taxes, right? They want to report things, is they have made as little money as possible to the government, a very, very common thing. And so they turn in the tax style financials to the prospective buyers. And then the buyer sees this and like, well, this isn't making any money, and then it's hard to have a constructive dialogue with a buyer if the financials aren't in place. Because when you're getting ready to sell a business, the main thing is you need to like paint it as something that's turnkey, right? Because investors don't want to take over a business where they're going to have to do the work. They're not buying a job. They're going to be buying something that is a cash flowing asset for them, right? And the second part is just having the financials in place so people, you can see that and sell it because you're ultimately marketing it, right? And if you're saying, oh, we're only making, a profit of $1,000 a month, and we have all this revenue, then that's not gonna sell for much. So the important thing is you have to have, there's two professionals really you need for this. You have to have a good accountant that can make the numbers look as beautiful as possible, but you also have to have somebody who knows about marketing, who can present things in such a way where that business is as appealing as possible.
Yeah. Wow, amazing, amazing. Thanks for sharing that, John. So, how can leaders balance day to day operation while preparing the business to be predictable and investor ready?
So, with day to day operations, the most important thing you can start today with is delegating, right? And by delegating, that means, turn the day to day operations that you don't particularly enjoy first to somebody who's better that you can trust in it. And you have to have the governance there in place to, ensure that things are being done appropriately. And then after you delegate the tasks that you don't like doing, in my case, I'd have somebody who handles finance take over more of that monotonous work because I'm a creative person. I like doing marketing and writing and strategies sort of activities. Then after you get rid of that, the stuff you don't like doing, what you're gonna do is you're gonna start training people to do the stuff that you do. Now, you have to expect that people aren't going to do it as well as you do because you're the founder.
Yeah.
The company is your baby, right? But you need to get them to, 80, 90% of what you can do. And then from there, you can, try to take a step back, spend less time in the office or, work from home more and see what happens. And then, eventually just get it ready for sale. I mean, the sales process is going to take a while, 6 to 18 months, at least between all of the paperwork that needs to be done. And for larger companies, even more.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thanks for sharing that, John. So, why do some businesses look ready for growth on paper but fails in execution?
That always comes down to personnel. Right? So, your personnel needs to be ready to handle the growth. Sometimes when you grow rapidly, your weaknesses are going to come out. I've seen organizations where they have a really good sales team, right? But the people on the back handling the product, they can't keep up with the sales team, or, they rush and they don't put out the highest quality possible of work for the customers, and that ultimately harms your reputation. But scaling is where your weak points come out.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. I think from what you just said, it just speaks volumes to when you scale a whole lot about small, small things that being ignored before is going to speak volume, being that now you are doing volume and a whole lot of things are coming handy. It's definitely the little, little things, the little, little error is going to be magnified and the personnel that is involved in it. If they didn't actually more like take care of those small, small lapses, could actually more like break the company. This is very, very key. So you have more like a background in direct response marketing. How does messaging shape trust during a moment of uncertainty?
Messaging is the most important thing you can have for trust, because the way people interpret what you're saying has a big deal on how they perceive the situation to be. So, like, let's say you have an employee and they do something wrong, right? That
Sure.
you can send them the message one of two ways. You can say, "Hey, you can improve this by doing, A and Z, or you can say, hey, you're doing a terrible job and you suck at your job, right? So it's the same message, right? But the first choice, obviously, is it's softer, it's better. They're going to receive that information. Whereas the second choice, that's mean, and they're going to feel bad, they're going to feel attacked, and they're not going to want to, you know, change really because they're taking it personally. You have to get the messaging right. Even for an ad campaign, if your messaging is a little bit off, it could cost you thousands of dollars in sales, or it can even get you like a lawsuit. So you have to really hone in and focus on making sure the messaging lands.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thanks for that. I think it just speaks volumes to as much as communication is happening through messages, one must, especially as an entrepreneur, when reaching out to giving feedback, one needs to be kind of choose words, being that some of them are seen as attack to personality other than from the perspective of the role, which later on they wouldn't want to change. And still, yeah, this really speaks volume. So, what role does storytelling play when leaders need to communicate and communicate hard truths without losing their team?
So, with storytelling, leaders need to just be able to frame the message in such a way that it emotionally resonates with the employees. Your businesses a lot of times can just descend into organized chaos, or you can feel like, you're the only one there, or, especially as an entrepreneur, you're the single person holding the ship together. By being able to create a narrative where employees can understand the situation, especially if it's a challenging one, the team can ultimately become stronger. Employees and humans, we're social creatures. We want to feel like we're appreciated, and we want to, feel like things are going in the right direction. We want to feel optimistic, and that's why you have to, tell a convincing story and frame the information appropriately.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think story really speak volume, being that sometimes direct messages might not speak volume when you want to give feedback, except you actually more like give a stories attached to it that shows that you understood their parts and being able to kind of pass your message to without hurting their personality. And yeah, it's really lovely. So, how can business owner build external credibility, even when internal structure are still forming?
So, building external credibility comes down to your positioning. So, you need to frame your work, in an appropriate, credible way. And it also comes down to your individual actions. So, a lot of startups I've worked with in the past, they're really hungry for investor money, and they have these big ideas, and they're like, oh, I'm finally going to be able to earn a big salary and everything. But the investors don't want to give you money so you can pay yourself a
Yeah.
lot of money. They want to make more money with it. You have to frame your information in such a way for the investors that they understand and say, hey, this person isn't going to take my money and, spend 20,000 curtains. There, a number of years ago, I advised a startup actually in Nigeria, and they did spend $20,000 curtains. And so
Oh,
I had to help the founder, draft some messaging to the investor. And obviously, the investor wasn't happy. But after we explained the mistake and the situation, things were a little bit smoother. Now, there weren't sufficient governance protocols in place for that organization. So they didn't get very far, but the $20,000 on the curtains was a good learning experience for the founder, and I'm sure he took away a lot with that. He did get funded a second time after the first business collapsed too. So another message in that is, just keep trying.
wow, I've been in a whole lot of experience being that it has to go through that particular part. But I love the fact that through messagings, the investor was being carried along, and despite they were happy, but at least you'll be glad that they were be actually more like they understood what was going on. And yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah. So what is the smartest first move a leader should make when in crisis? When crisis hits?
The first move when a crisis hits is you have to take a step back, okay? And you have to let things sink in. So that can be, just going to bed early that night or taking a quick walk. You have to clear your head and, really assess the situation for what it is.
Yeah, assess the situation where it is. And I think it's very rare, key, especially when you say assess the situation when it is. Most times, especially entrepreneurs, when crisis hits sometimes, it's easier for them to blame themselves rather than looking at the business as a separate entity to view it that what goes wrong, what can they do different. Sometimes they see themselves that they actually more like blame most of the stuff on themselves, and just hearing you make reference of yeah, just go home, take a walk and look critically into the business as more like a separate entity, not just from the part that blaming yourself, putting the blame on yourself as part being the owner or the founder of the particular company. And I think this is a very lovely way of actually looking at it. In that very way, you could be able to kind of detach yourself from it, detach your emotion from it, and being able to kind of absorb it critically. Yeah, thank you.
Oh no,
So
that
how do
I
you?
just want to
Yeah,
I want to touch back on that too. I'd say the
okay.
toughest thing for me as an entrepreneur is separating yourself from the business. You put a lot of heart and soul into the business, and then when you see that something goes wrong, oh, it just can be so devastating to you personally. But you have to, you know, understand that like when you have a corporation, the law looks at it like it's a different thing than you, right? So you need to keep that in mind. The business is a separate person. It's not you. And that easy to say, but it's taken me
Yeah,
years
yeah,
and
so
years
true.
and years to finally learn it.
Yeah, and I think that is where more like our building government even come into in. If every entrepreneur should be thinking about our building in government or starting out, I think with time it's easier for them to be able to detach themselves, being that they are not just seeing themselves or spearheading every single thing for that long time. Over time, they will be able to kind of delegate and leave out some particular stuff. If not, if you keep shouldering everything as as the founder, it's difficult to kind of just detach yourself because a whole lot of things are went online and every string is going to pull your emotion, not just not just because you get to remember the histories of how things went on and how you're able to survive to the point where you are, and it's difficult to detach just the way you said it. Yeah. So, how do you help our leaders operate with clarity when the margins of error is slim?
So, with that, really, it comes down to taking time to getting to know the leader and how they specifically work. Some founders are more emotional and they need to have information presented to them using, rich emotional vocabulary. And you're going to have to touch on their feelings. You're going to have to acknowledge their feelings. And you have to share your feelings with them. Where other leaders, they're gonna wanna hear things without any feeling possible, and they just wanna hear facts, and they wanna reason things out logically. Some leaders, they like to read, right? So you give them reports. Other leaders, they need to be walked through verbally, and they need to talk, and it needs to be a more collaborative process. So, to get to the real clarity, you have to begin by understanding yourself and understanding the leaders. You have to understand that no one's perfect and you have to give them a margin of error. When I advise clients, I really take time to get to know them and everything. And there's always additional preoccupations and additional worries that people have that affect their job performance. We're not robots like ChatGPT. We are, humans with flesh and blood and hopes and desires. So that adds in some complexity into the situation.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for that. So, what surprising traits have you seen in effective leaders working in fragile markets?
Surprising traits. So people who do good in fragile markets have a good tolerance for handling things with unknown outcomes. That's the biggest one, right? So, launching a new advertising campaign in a country where you don't have the most experience in, you know, you have to give yourself some margin for error in that. But I'm tolerating just unpredictability and, strange things happening. That's one of the most important traits that somebody who works in fragile markets can. Like, for example, here in Peru, we change the president all the time. They recently overthrew the president, and it's been like, 10, 20 years since we've had a president that's finished their full term. On the outside, as a foreign investor, people are going to be like, well, that country isn't stable, right? But, people do make money here, and there are a lot of spectacularly wealthy individuals in this country, but they've learned how to tolerate these sorts of cycles. I remember too when I advised my Nigerian startup a number of years ago, there were some pretty intense protests happening with the Buhari regime and everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of really exciting things were coming out. I remember they said he's a clone. They took him to the yeah. Where did they take Buhari to clone him? I can't remember the specific country, but I remember they said that he was a clone and everything.
Yeah. 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 This is really amazing. Fine. So what should finders focus on if they want their business to be attractive to investors and potential buyer in the future?
So people need to focus on having a good business that functions, right? So you need to have something that, I mean, all investors want a business to run by itself. They want to have that second tier management team in place. They don't want it to be owner dependent. They want to have the systems and processes in place for the business to function appropriately. That's the first thing, right? That's the qualified for that. But outside of that, it just has to be a fundamentally good business. And by that, I mean, it needs to maintain stable growth. The product needs to be good. The business team needs to be ethical. The new owner doesn't want to come into a business and discover there's a lawsuit or, some sort of government problem that's going to happen once ownership transition changes. So that's the main thing. And you also
Yeah.
need to be able to present things in such a way that it's appealing, right? Like if you're going to be trying to get an international buyer for your business, and they do happen, you're going to have to present information in terms that they can understand.
For blue collar entrepreneurs and hands-on business owner, what government habits should they build early?
So local entrepreneurs need to begin by building a set of really simple rules that people can follow. That's what it comes down to for governance, is just building simple rules. So like let's say you have a business that you repair kitchens, right? You put in the new cabinets and everything. You come up with a documented set of rules that everybody has to follow to explain how things are done. And that can range from something as simple as filling out the form the correct way every time so that information is standardized. And it can be something even bigger. But you need to have the rules and the documentation in place to, be able to refer back and learn from the mistakes when they happen. Because as I said before, nobody's perfect and mistakes are going to
Yeah.
happen. You need to have a set of rules that can be adaptable and functional for everybody so that they can have the government's work, because there's been other situations where I've come into organizations and they have a 50-page governance document, right, and there's only 4 people working there and 3 of them didn't read the governance document. So it has to be the right amount of governance for the right people.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Finally, is one high pressure lessons every business owner should understand before they hit their next growth stage.
So I believe every business owner needs to understand that when you transition from growth stages, it's going to be painful, right? And you're going to be operating in new territory. And, things that worked at one level aren't going to work at the next level. So you're going to have to be adaptable and, you're going to make mistakes. You have to accept that. Don't beat yourself up for that. But a lot of it is just mindset, right? You could say, I want to make $1 million, but you don't know what that actually feels like until you get there. Then once you get there, you realize, oh, that wasn't, the next level is even harder. So
Yeah,
it's like when you go up to a high mountain, the oxygen gets thin and you struggle to breathe. But after a few days up there, you get used to it and walking around doesn't feel as challenging as it did before.
yeah. Thank you, John. So, John, how can my audience reach out to you? How can they connect with you? How can I do business with you? And what is the best platform to do this?
So, the best platform is, reach out to me on my LinkedIn, which is going to be in the show notes. I'm available for that. Just mention that you heard me on the show, and I'll get back to you. And you can also visit my website, which is Pholus. That's PHOLUS. That's CO. You can learn more about what I do there. And yeah,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, John, thank you for bringing such a sharp, practical insight to today's conversation. Your experience in high pressure markets and crisis leadership offer lessons every entrepreneur can apply it, no matter the size of their business. To everyone listening, you can explore more on Just Work and John's work case study and resources at follows.co. Keep building, keep leading, and keep showing up with purpose. I'm Aro Benaiah, the host of Aro Benaiah Show. And once again, it's a really pleasure having you on the show.
yeah. Thank you, Ara. It was great being here.